Yes, I do. Are you ready?
Yep.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Committee of the Whole for June 24th. If you could please call the roll.
Councilmember Wood,
Here.
Councilmember Spatafor, Councilmember Spitzley, Councilmember Dunbar, Councilmember Washington, Councilmember Garza, Councilmember Hussein, Councilmember Jackson.
All right. Councilmember Washington has asked for an excused absence. There is a town hall meeting at the Faith Fellowship Church on Dakin with the NAACP, and she is at that meeting. So with that, we have minutes for June 10th. Vice President Spatafor.
Madam President, I move the approval of the minutes from June 10th, 2019 as presented.
We have a motion on the minutes. Are there any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Next is an opportunity for public comment. If there is anyone here from the public that would like to make comment, please come up to the podium, state your name for the record, and you will have 3 minutes.
Elaine Fishoff. I live at 2536 Windbreak in Lansing. I want to propose an amendment to the budget. The council assigned $175,000 to do unspecified sustainability projects. I would request that the council reconsider and use as much of that money as needed for a sustainability manager. It's my understanding that 2 weeks before the budget passage, somebody suggested a chief strategy officer, and lo and behold, the budget was passed with one in there. So I think that this council could move as fast. Again, for something that is just as urgently needed, a sustainability officer. That sustainability officer would create a climate action plan and join a list of cities. There's a handout, and this isn't exactly up to date yet, but it shows Ann Arbor, Dearborn, Grand Rapids, Hazel Park, Southgate, Traverse City, Ypsilanti. They all have climate action plans. Most of them have climate sustainability managers. The capital of Michigan should be a leader in this area, not playing catch-up, or in this case, not planning or playing at all, because we have neither a sustainability manager nor a climate action plan. That's my request. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And just for your clarification, the budget has been passed. We are past the time for any reconsideration. So the only request at this time would be to add this in October to the priority list of requests that would go to the mayor's office for creating a budget for the following year. So at this point, we cannot go back and go into the budget again. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Carol Rawl. I've lived in Lansing over 50 years. In fact, in the same house on Shiawassee for 42 years. And I love Lansing, and I've done what I can. I'm very proud of the fact that back in the 90s, I was part of the initiative to bring curbside recycling to Lansing. In 2008, I was part of a group called Lansing Can Do Better that prevented the disastrous Board of Water and Light decision to build another coal plant. And years later, George Stojic actually thanked us for that. In the last couple of years, I've been attending several of the Board of Water and Light Commission meetings and trying to express my concerns about the fracked gas plant that they're planning. And the climate reality is that the Board of Water and Light is Lansing's biggest carbon footprint. And I felt that the commissioners, no offense to Mr. Peffley, but that they didn't respond. There was no interest in our concerns. And I happen to know that a couple of them are up for appointment. And I know that Becky Payne and Chris Wisniewski are both top-notch people. They have put in their applications to be on the commission. They're just would do the right thing and be a great asset to the board commission for our interest in Lansing's energy future. And so I hope you will consider them. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments? Hi, Steve.
My name is Steve Rawl, and regarding the climate situation, I want to quote from The Uninhabitable Earth, a new book, subtitled Life After Warming. How much hotter will it get? The question may sound scientific, inviting expertise, but the answer is almost entirely human, which is to say political. When will the planet warm by 2 degrees? When by 3? When will sea level rise? How much? 2030, 2050, 2100, as our children are leaving the earth to their children and grandchildren? Which cities will flood? Which forests will dry out? Which breadbaskets will become husks? The uncertainty is among the most momentous meta-narratives that climate change will bring to our culture over the next decades. An eerie lack of clarity about it, what kind of world we will live in even look like just a decade or two, 10 to 20 years down the road, when we'll be living in the same homes, paying the same mortgages, watching the same TV shows, and making appeals to maybe some of the same justices on the Supreme Court. But while there are a few things science does not know about the climate system, will respond to all the carbon we've pumped into the air, the uncertainty of what will happen emerges not from scientific ignorance, but overwhelmingly from the open question of how we will respond to that. That is, how much more carbon we decide to emit, which is not a question for natural sciences, but for human choices. Climatologists can today predict with uncanny accuracy where a hurricane will hit and at what intensity, as much as a week out from landfall. When it comes to global warming, the models are just as good, but the key input is a mystery. What will we do? The lessons are unfortunately bleak. We have made no meaningful adjustment to our production or consumption of energy to account for climate disruption that we've known for centuries, for decades. Politics has produced gestures of tremendous global solidarity and cooperation, then discarded those promises immediately. It has become commonplace among climate activists to say that we have today all the tools we need to avoid catastrophic climate change. But political will is not some trivial ingredient always at hand. So for Lansing to dump 30 more years of carbon emissions into the air from a new fossil fuel plant is unconscionable. Yet that is what BWL has decided to do with a city leadership that has blinders on or are unwilling to listen to the people or an abject denial of the consequences of their inaction. We need new leadership on BWL, and I would suggest also that Chris Wisniewski and Becky Payne be considered as commissioners for the Board of Water and Light. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council at this time?
Good evening, City Council. My name is Anna Fisher. I'm with Lansing Environmental Action Team. Last week, Petoskey voted unanimously to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2035 for the entire city, not just for city-operated buildings. Lansing is woefully behind when it comes to responding to the climate emergency, a problem only made worse by your unwillingness to create the sustainability manager position in the 2020 budget. Tonight, you will decide on whether or not to approve the mayor's recommendations for the BWL Board of Commissioners. Unlike other boards, These commissioner appointments are so important and serious because they will decide how we're going to respond to the climate emergency. As a city, as a region, as a world community, we are all tasked with decarbonizing the grid. This is a huge undertaking and one that requires some expertise, some knowledge about energy, and a commitment to tell the truth about climate and to draft policies to protect the health and safety of Lansing residents. I urge you to take a no vote on the mayor's recommendation of Ken Ross. He is an accountant. He has demonstrated his poor judgment and incompetence on energy by his enthusiastic support of the fracked gas plant that he voted for in March of 2018. I don't have time to spell out here all the dangers of fracking. There are many grave concerns, but this article from today's newspaper. A recent study conducted at Duke University revealed that hydraulic fracking is having a catastrophic impact on water supplies throughout the U.S. The findings of the study suggest that fracking is using far more water than before and putting a huge dent in the amount of drinkable water and available water supplies. 5 countries have banned fracking, and the states of New York, Vermont, and Maryland. Chris Wisniewski has applied for the at-large seat on the BWL Board of Commissioners. He has the knowledge and experience that a BWL commissioner should have and has demonstrated his commitment to Lansing's clean energy future by taking part in the meetings to draft a climate action plan for Lansing. I'm not familiar with Mr. Joseph Graves, the mayor's recommendation for the 3rd Ward. We are not necessarily opposing Mr. Graves. He has indicated a willingness to learn, and he has some useful experience in understanding how dangerous it can be to swallow BWL's ideas hook, line, and sinker without independent analysis. Mr. Graves' energy experience, however, is from the 70s. Given the current climate crisis we are facing, we need the mayor to recommend people to the BWL Commission with a background in energy that can help forge a clean energy future for this region.
Go ahead with your,
Thank you. I just have a little bit more. Becky Payne is from the 3rd Ward. She applied to be a BWL commissioner 2 years ago and has a commitment, knowledge, and experience in energy. When we were together 2 weeks ago, there had been some floods in Lansing, and you were all talking about what to do and who to call. And then since then, we've had more floods, and I would just like to connect the dots that flooding is a direct consequence of global warming. So please vote no on Ken Ross. And lastly, you will also vote tonight on the BWL budget. And if the city had a sustainability manager, someone that could advise us on energy, then you would be able to offer more scrutiny and analysis to the BWL plan. Again, thank you very much.
thank you. And just for clarification, we are not voting on their budget. They create their own. We just review the information that they're presenting. So,
Do you approve it?
no, we do not.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council at this point?
Good evening, City Council members. It's good to be before you again. My name is Peter Wood, and this evening I'm not here to represent parks, but something larger than parks, I think. Here's what I've written. We know that 2 things are in danger in this country and the world at large. One of them is democracy and democratic process. Ordinary citizens are ruled out of the democratic process of choosing our leaders and our policies. So I'm here as an ordinary citizen tonight. The other thing in danger is the environment. Climate change and environmental degradation, including the increasing loss of purity of air and water, are upon us. They are upon us faster than we thought they would be. There are, of course, moneyed interests who find it inconvenient to acknowledge this and to take responsibility for the wisest course to preserve a wholesome environment. But we have seen that some states, and I'm thinking here particularly of New York and California, about which I've heard recently, are taking decisive action to reduce pollution, particularly plastics, and to reduce their carbon footprint. Cities can also take such responsibility. You heard about Petoskey just a moment ago. And this is what I'm asking this City Council to do in respect of the Board of Water and Light's proposal to increase investment in fossil fuels and fracking. I'm a grandfather now. I shudder to think that my granddaughters, one of whom has asthma, will look back when they're my age, 73, and wonder, where was our wisdom? Where was our foresight? Where was our willingness to put aside our short-term economic interests in favor of the beauty of the land that we would bequeath to them? So here's your chance to both support democracy by listening to the wisdom of the citizens who are before you today on this issue and have come before you in previous council sessions, and also to stand in solidarity with the beauty and integrity of our land by addressing directly the current climate crisis in respect of the Board of Water and Light's proposals. I am here in accord with the words and recommendations just spoken to you by Anna Fisher. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board at this time?
Jim Drabenstamp Mosseri, Assistant Business Manager, IBW Local 352, 1331 Hosta Court, Holt, Michigan. I came here tonight to support the appointment of Joseph Graves to the 3rd Ward for Commissioner at Lansing Board of Water and Light. I'd like to add that back when Mayor Bernero was looking into selling the Board of Water and Light, Joe came out publicly supporting our local when we had to hire a PR firm to get the message out to the community. It was the wrong idea of looking into selling the Board of Water and Light. And Joe came out publicly not supporting the sell of the board, and our local supported it, as well as I'm sure several employees at the Lansing Board of Water and Light. And so tonight I would like to give support to Joe for his appointment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board at this time?
Hello. Good evening, City Council members. My name is Nathan Jemison. I'm a Lansing owner coming here to echo the statements of Anna Fisher, Elaine Fishoff, and Peter Wood, as well as others, in urging the City Council to consider the sustainability resumes in your election of future appointments to BWL Commission. Lansing has a long way to go in terms of catching up with other cities around the states and developing a comprehensive climate plan that will do our part in meeting the Paris Climate Agreement. I'm deeply concerned that some current and past appointments to the Board of LBWL Commissioners do not represent the will of the public or the urgency needed to adequately address the climate crisis. I also oppose rate hikes by BWL that are not going solely to non-fossil fuel energy solutions. I'm disappointed to see that the opposition to the new frac gas plant has been largely disregarded and has left concerned parties with little to no representation that is taking the crisis seriously. For these reasons, I advocate for the appointment of Chris Wisniewski and Becky Payne to the Board of Commissioners of BWL. I've reviewed their resumes and feel that they would be an appropriate choice to represent the publicly owned utility of Lansing in working towards sustainable energy infrastructure conversion. Thank you for making the necessary changes to address the climate crisis and meet the needs of future generations who are counting on these decisions.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board at this time?
Good evening, City Council members. My name is Suzanne Jemison. I'm a 35-year resident of Lansing City. I came tonight in support of the recommendations put forth by Elaine Fishoff and Anna Fisher for selecting a BWL commissioner who shares my deep concerns regarding the climate crisis. The world scientific community is in agreement warning that we have a very short time of approximately a decade to just begin ameliorating the devastating effects of the environment caused by the fossil fuel use. Lansing area must move rapidly toward the implementation of the implementation of clean, sustainable energy use. This imperative has been largely ignored by BWL, a public entity, especially with the approval of a large new power plant for natural gas derived from fracking. I urge the Board of Water and Light to select a commissioner who has the knowledge and will to represent adoption and rapid implementation of a comprehensive green energy program for the greater Lansing area. Thank you for allowing me to address this issue.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council at this time? Councilmember Spitzley.
Madam President, I just want to make sure, and particularly for the people who are watching, I'm assuming that the audience understands the process, but I think we need to can you give a brief overview of the process by which a commissioner, it's not the city council that picks a commissioner. So can you kind of briefly give the process by which that happens?
Yes, but what I'd like to do is wait until the public gets done with their comments.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
thank you. Is there anyone else in the public that would like to make a comment at this time? Anyone else that would like to make a comment? Okay, with that being said, we will, before we start the presentation from the BWL on their budget and capital improvement plan, just a couple of things. First of all, as I had indicated earlier, the budget and capital improvement plan is not something that's passed by council. It's an informational opportunity for us to listen to what the board is proposing. This is voted on by their commissioners and approved by that independent body as according to the charter. As the appointment of commissioners to the Board of Water and Light, applications are given to the routed into the mayor's office. The mayor's office vets those applications, makes a recommendation, usually interviews those people before making a proposal, and then they are forwarded on to City Council. City Council has the ability to vote them up or down, not to change who the people are that are being supported by the mayor. Our only option in this is to have a discussion with the people that are being appointed to get their viewpoints on different items, and then we do have the ability, again, to vote them up or down. And what I would do is quickly turn to the executive assistant for Mayor Shore and ask, we have the appointment of Joe Graves for the 3rd Ward, as well as a reappointment of Ken Ross for the at-large position. And if you would please speak to those 2 appointments coming from the mayor's office.
Of course. So the mayor nominates, as you indicated, candidates who are qualified Lansing residents who are vetted by our Treasury Department and the Lansing Police Department, and then as well reviewed by City Council before they are appointed to boards. And we support all of our nominees wholeheartedly. These are residents who volunteer their time and talent, so both of the recommendations before you this evening we do support. Okay. In terms of the specific policy decisions that were mentioned in public comment, we, as the mayor's office, do not get involved in the operations of the Board of Water and Light. We appoint people to the board, and we anticipate that they make the best decision for the community and for the board based on the information that is given to them by Mr. Peffley and his staff. And again, we support both Mr. Ross and Mr. Graves in their appointments to the Board of Water and Light board, reappointment and appointment.
Okay. And you receive several applications for positions and go through those. It's not as if you only have a few for this.
Correct, and this is a popular one, so we do receive a number of applications.
All right, thank you. With that, the first thing I'd like to do is have Mr. Peffley come forward with the budget and capital improvement plan. I'm sorry, Councilmember Jackson, you had a question? I didn't see your hand.
Yes, thank you. Just a follow-up on that. You said that you review the applications. I guess who from the administration vets the applications?
So Marilyn Plummer in office receives the applications, and she and the mayor sit down and go through them specifically, and then they are then also vetted by Treasury and LPD before they come to council.
All right, thank you. In your packet, you will have the information that's been provided by the board. And again, you've been here enough, make sure that the green light is on when you're speaking. And if you could go over your budget and capital improvements for this year, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening, council members. Council President Wood, as required, we submitted our budget, and Heather Shaw, our CFO, is going to go over it in a high level and then be available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Peffley. Good evening, council members, council president. Thanks for having us this evening. In the information that we provided, I'm going to start with our fiscal 20 income statement by utility. So high level, from a revenues, we are looking at total operating revenue for the fiscal year for just over 400 million. From a consumption, our consumption projections for the revenue and the utilities is flat. So we're actually, in our forecast period, we're actually projecting a slight decrease in water, and that's primarily conservation activities. So from a consumption, it's a flat budget. Operating expenses, we have 331.8 million rounded up, leaving us with total operating income of 68.3 million. Below the line, or net of operating expenses, we have our return on equity projected at 23.7 million for next operating budget. Interest expense and the non-operating income and expense, which leaves us with 49.9 million of total non-operating income, in this case expense, with a total net income for next fiscal year projected at 18.3 million. That does leave us with a return on assets of 2.73, which we do have a targeted rate of return for our utility, and over the forecast period, we show achieving that rate of return, which our current target is 4.66%, and that's calculated annually, which if the forecast or 6-year forecast from an operating stance, we show achieving our return on assets of 4.66 in fiscal year 24.
Does that include a rate increase?
Yes, so this operating and forecast period does include year 3 of 3 from our rate strategy. So we implemented a 3-year rate strategy with rate increases February 1 of 2018, 19, and 20. So this does show, actually, it shows by utility. So on average, for electric, the 3% that would go into effect 2/1 of 20. And then next year, as we update our IRP and our next strategic plan, parallel to that, we will be looking at our rate strategy going forward and making recommendations to the commission on that for future.
Okay, are there any questions on that? Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you. I heard you say that the projection for water was going to be slightly lower next year. Do you have a projection for electricity for that same year or beyond?
From a, for our forecast period, we did project a flat. So even though we do have significant development in the area and we have some good commercial industrial customers coming to the service territory with our energy efficiency programs, we are projecting a flat. So even though we have growth coming, we do see a flat demand.
Other questions?
So, and I know you're CFO,
Yes.
but are there, I guess, what are the efforts to make it possible for a negative forecast in the future?
Well, a negative forecast is a I think what you're looking at is we have an energy conservation program to save our customers 1% annually. We have exceeded that goal since we started it, which we were the first utility in the state to start it, even before it was mandated. That initiative does roll off in 2021 as a state requirement. We don't plan on letting it roll off then. We will continue to save our customers 1%. Now, it does get harder each year, but we have beat that goal every year since we started that. So that is what we're looking at to save our customers energy usage. Now, we do have growth, so positive growth when it's new customers coming with highly efficient operations is a growth model that we like to sustain. But overall, it's, like I said, we're going on 12 years of reducing our customers' annual usage by over 1%, which is the requirement.
Any other questions? Looking at this? Okay, take us to the next
Okay.
one.
Next page is a high-level fiscal operating year 20, our consolidated cash flow. So just cash flow statement looks at our beginning cash, which is estimated to end this fiscal year at $72 million. Our net income for next fiscal year of 18.3, and then our sources of cash showing in those items. I will point out the big number on here is our bond construction fund for the new Delta Energy Park. We actually close tomorrow on that bond issuance. It was priced last Thursday. It was a successful pricing, and so as we receive those bond proceeds in the next few days, we will be putting them into a designated bond construction fund. So that shows sources from for next year, and then if you look down below total uses of cash, the other big number there is obviously the expenditures for the construction. So we did break ground, and we have construction for the Delta Energy Park underway. It broke ground June 3rd, with construction going through June, actually March of 2021, with commissioning of the plant scheduled for June of 2021.
Are there questions on that? With the construction of the Scott Garden project, the substation, is that under budget or on budget or over budget?
The central substation in Hull, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, the central substation has it has exceeded budget. Construction costs for more than we anticipated for the height of the wall and some other variables. The project is being closed out right now. The substation is supplying energy downtown to Lansing. We're down to putting in some sod and sprinkling systems, and then we'll be opening up the garden here pretty quick.
How much over budget was it?
About $6 million. And that was reported to our commissioners and approved.
Okay. Are there other questions on that? Okay, let's take it to the next page. Thank you. Oh, Brian, I'm sorry. You've got to make that hand
Yeah, I'm
higher
sorry.
so I can see it.
Sorry. So, has anybody seen the recent, I guess, findings that natural gas is equally as bad as coal? And if you have, because they're recent, I know, you know, these plans have been going on for so many years. If you have seen them, does that change anything?
Well, obviously, yeah, we look at all the reports that come out. We have an entire department that, you know, studies the environmental issues. The faster and sooner that we can transition to wind and solar is definitely the company's goal. We just have to balance that. We attend conferences. I went to one last month where all the public utilities were there to look at storage, you know, because storage isn't there yet. And so when we don't get anything from our solar array or our wind farms, we have to back that power up. So our intent is that the more renewables we bring on, as the less that we have to run our new plant, which is by design. The plant's made to cycle on and off fast, which you can't do with a coal plant. So the plant bridges are moved from coal to 100% renewable. And that, when the plant comes online and we retire the 2 coal plants, we will have reduced our carbon footprint by 80% in 2025, which is a very impressive goal.
Go ahead.
So, and I appreciate the 100% goal and the 40% and all those percentages, but from what I guess the understanding is that we just got to bring everything down as we bring up our renewables. That's the only way we're going to get to 100%, because as you mentioned, we're expanding still. But the other just troubling thing is just, you know, the bridge period is, you know, the 30 years or however long it is, and that bridge period takes us beyond our scope of, basically we're at the tipping point, but our actions to combat it are at the infancy level. So it's just that 30 years, and if there was just a way to scale it down, I think a lot of people would appreciate that in the future.
Well, our intent is that when renewables, as fast as we can build them, that we will scale back ahead. You know, it is cheaper to use the renewables when they're available because there's no fuel cost with it. But building renewables in the state of Michigan is, I'm going to say, problematic, almost getting impossible. You can't license a wind farm in this state. We've been trying for 3 years now to get one on. We have $70 million the company sunk into up in Tuscola County, and they voted to stop that farm. That's the second one. So, you know, we are trying. It's nobody wants it in their backyard. I'm not going to talk about the politics of it, but, you know, we're trying to be very aggressive. We just signed a new agreement for more solar, but at 6 acres per megawatt, as I talked to you at the last meeting, you know, that's to replace our load with solar's 23 square miles of the service territory. Now, you should always take advantage of rooftops and things like that, but that doesn't add up to a utilities solar. So we are on the same page, just trying to get there. Is you know, I appreciate the question because it is very, very hard to get one of these projects up and running. Though our wind farm is almost 2 years behind schedule.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that, and that's why the numbers that you guys boast as far as however many percentage by whatever year, it's just not as realistic because of these challenges and there's no answer for them right now, it sounds like. So when you put the numbers out on a projection, you know, it's just going to be hard to meet it, and I'm just worried that, you know, those numbers are in the future and we're still, you know, in the past. But it's just, I know you have the blocks in the land and all these things, but that was part of the plan to reach these numbers. Therefore, if those don't work, how do you reach those numbers?
We, our clean energy plan of 30% clean energy by 2020, we will make that. I assure you that we will not miss that goal. We've got contracts in place to get there. And then we're looking at 40% by 2030. That's a little farther out, and we go, but the 30% clean energy by 2020, which is well above requirements, which we believe we should be, because that's you'll be at requirements by then. It'll be 15%. That we will be at 30%. We have contingency plans in place if the wind farm doesn't come on with more solar that we signed contracts for that, which is projects that we're buying into that are under construction. It's a little pricier because people know that it's hard to get one off the ground, but that goal of 30% by 2020 is, I won't be back here telling you we didn't make that. You're welcome.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. Last item on the, sorry, thank you. Last item on the cash flow does show us ending with the days cash on hand at 178 days. We did implement a recommendation to our board, and they approved a minimum cash reserve policy. That was last May. So the minimum cash reserve requirement is based on our policy. So that's at 154 days. And then if you don't mind, I'd like to move to the fourth slide, which shows our 6-year capital improvement plan. I'll cover fiscal 20, but it's just everything's on one page. So our fiscal 2020 to 2025 capital improvement plan. The major items in fiscal 20 obviously is the Delta Energy Park, but we do show our capital budget excluding the new plant at $58.7 million for the next operating year. Delta Energy Park does go over into fiscal 2021 as well, but you see that at just over $236 million. And then below, we show location. So Ecker and Erickson, those are our two coal plants. You'll notice that there is a small amount in Ecker. You wouldn't expect to see any capital improvements with us decommissioning the plant. However, we do need to enhance some security items. So it's actually when a plant is decommissioned and doesn't have as much traffic, we have to, from a critical infrastructure, because we still have our switchyard there, we need to make sure that we add some security measures. And then Erickson shows also minimal. That plant is planned to come offline fiscal 2025, actually December of that year. And so it shows minimal amounts, which would be items for safety or security measures. And then if there's no questions, we do show over the 6 years, including the Delta Energy Park, which is more than, just about half of it. We show a 6-year improvement plan of $688 million with the plant.
Okay, is there any questions on that? Did I hear any questions? None. Before we let you go, one of the suggestions that I would make at this time, based on the comments not only tonight, but when we were at our joint Board of Commissioners meeting, we have a great deal of people who are very concerned about the climate issues and the energy, which of course you're in the business. But one of the things that I found that the board did very well, and that was when we had the ice storm and there was a creation of a citizens board that came together to look over materials and facts and make recommendations to the board. I would strongly encourage, from my perspective, that might be one of the things that you could do. I know you have conversations from time to time with the public on different issues, and you do surveys and things like that. But I think it would be a good public relations as well as a sincere effort to sit down and to gather some of these people who have done a great deal of research on this, to work alongside some of the same people that you have that are doing research and talk about what you're doing and get a better understanding from both avenues. And I would encourage you to look at maybe starting such a committee to, again, make some recommendations to the board.
Well, the timing is kind of perfect for that because we have started our IRP, Integrated Resource Plan, where the public has input like we did 3-4 years ago. So we'll be reaching out to any group that wants to talk to us. We've already started that with our industrial and commercial customers. It'll be run by our strategic planner, Brandy Ekren. She was formerly our counsel. So she will be working with any group that wants to talk about the future of the Board of Water and Light, what it should look like, and gather input from all the stakeholders on that. So I think that's similar to what you're asking for us to do. And then that gets rolled up into a strategic plan, which is presented and has to be approved by the commissioners.
Yes and no, it is. When we went through the environmental crisis that we had with GM on the west side, we actually put together, and through the mayor's office at that time, Mayor Hollister worked with the neighborhood to put together a committee that started meeting with GM. We met on a quarterly basis with them. They talked about all the things that they were doing to deal with some of the environmental issues. They also formed partnerships where when there were, and again, I realize we're talking about climate versus pollution, but when the community smelt different smells that were coming from the plant, there was a hotline number that was directed right there to people at GM. We ended up putting up testing gear at Sexton High School that helped with that. And they met on, as I said, on a quarterly basis and having that interaction with both groups. I think it's great that you're having your strategic plan, but to meet once or twice with them and then rolling it up is not the same as saying, okay, we understand the environmental issues, we understand the fact that there are goals that we have, but together, what we're gonna do is to look at this and how we can both talk to each other about this better. So that's more what I'm looking at versus just a meeting with them.
Understood.
Thank you. Are there any more questions on this? Councilmember Spitzley.
I don't have any more questions on that, but if we're done, at some point, are you going to give us an update on the installation of the smart meters? Because I know that's happening around the city.
Sure, we can do that. This
Okay.
is Heather's project.
We are actually doing very well, so we're just over 50% deployment of electric meters and pretty close to that on water. So we're on track. We had milestone number of meters installed, so by our fiscal year in each quarter. So we track that. So based on the this June fiscal year, we will be slightly over what we had planned for installs. We've got our pilots, so we have a friends and family of employees and commissioners where we're piloting, and soon we'll be looking at what our customers will see down the road as far as portals. So that infrastructure is and deployment is going well.
Okay. So you can still stay right there. We don't want you to leave yet. We're gonna move down to the next item, which is the tree and stump removal project in Colonial Village, and this is directly with the Board of Water and Light. I do know that the administration is working at, according to the mayor's office, working at a plan throughout the city dealing with our city trees, and that is something that they're still working on. But we do have, the last time you were before us on the Scott Garden, the comment came up when that was asked that you were waiting to hear from the neighborhood on that. We do have a representative from the neighborhood, if you'd come forward at this time. Yep.
I'm Karen Barrow. I'm from the Neighborhood Association. I'm on the board.
And if you could explain the issues that, and the outcome that you're looking for at this point.
When the trimming and tree cutting occurred in the neighborhood at Colonial Village, there are a number of trees in the easement in the neighborhood, and in particular, the oldest part of the neighborhood was hit quite difficultly with this. They really would like, throughout the neighborhood, for the tree stumps in the easement on property, on homeowners' property to be ground, so that they're not going to be a blight on their property value.
I do know that Councilmember Jackson has been approached about this from members of the third ward, or fourth ward, Councilmember Hussein from the third ward, and Councilmember Spitzley has been as well. And we do know that we have, the city does own a stump grinder. It's something that we would like you to work with the city to see if there's a way that we can resolve this issue for the neighborhood.
We look forward to working with the city on a citywide program for this.
Okay.
Yep.
So I know, Samantha, that the mayor had thought that they might have something ready by July 8th. Is that still the goal?
I don't know that we'll have something ready by then. I know we're working on it, but we are still working through that, so.
So if you could give us an update the first part of the week so we know whether this is something that we'll have on the agenda again. Councilmember Dunbar.
Thank you. Is the thought that we would give the board our chipper and have their
Yes.
tree okay.
Yep.
So there's a lot of trees that are affected by this, and I know that in the West Side neighborhood, last year, they actually applied for grants and they pooled their money from the neighborhood association to go in on massive trunk or stump grinding throughout the neighborhood. What is the cost projection for each stump to be removed? Do you know?
No, we don't. When we embarked on tree trimming, the intent then was not to remove the stumps. We spent a lot of money removing people's trees that we wouldn't have necessarily removed. They would say, can you just take the tree down for us? Since we weren't planning on doing this stump removal, we went ahead and did that, where we would normally just trimmed, or there'd be a dead tree, and they say, can you take that down? We did a lot of that, so we have to sit back and see how many stumps are from tree trimming, how many were requested to take down, and it really needs to be a citywide approach, and the board will be involved with it to see where we need to go, because what is going to be done in one area, we would have to treat, in my mind, all our customers the same way, and so we don't have an idea of the time. We've had talks with the city. They've been proactive, reaching out to us on this, and so we're looking at the best way to resolve it. It is very complicated. It sounds a little simpler just to grind the stump out, but it's not. It's complicated, and I saw, not the cost, but they told me the other day, my forest department said that that grinding the stump is not the most expensive part. You got to remove the sawdust. You got to restore the lawn, things like that. So we need to work through that. But I think there's a lot of ways to look at this. If we, but we just need to work with the city. And I'm not putting it back on the city. The board cut down a lot of trees, and we need to see what the best avenue to rectify this.
Okay.
And I appreciate that, and I realize that we do need to treat the city as a whole.
Yep.
But this is no different than when we started moving around the city, trimming the trees. If this is the area that has brought this to our attention, and as you start then moving through the rest of the city, if you look at that, I'm not asking you to go backwards, I'm asking you to move forward, and so that we can see how we can deal with that.
I understand.
Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. As a member of the Board of Water and Light Review team back in the day, and realizing that, and no offense, that the board did not do a very good job of tree trimming in the past, which is kind of why we're here, and now it's very drastic. I agree that if, when you're doing your trimming, I remember they came by my house and I told them to cut my tree down, and I had to ultimately dig out the stump. So there's gotta be, I agree that there's gotta be some sort of mechanism to figure out, if you're doing it and you cut down the tree because someone asks you, that there's gotta be some sort of cost sharing in that respect. But if you cut down a tree, because of whatever, then that's a different thing. So I get that it's complicated, but I'm just hoping that, you guys are continuing to work through that to try to find a resolution for those folks in Colonial Village, because I agree with President Wood that, it's Colonial Village people talking today, but, as you go around, the different neighborhoods, and, it is going to turn into a citywide issue, but the Colonial Village people, have some, and I walk by there, and so I understand what the issues are, but I do appreciate you looking at it holistically, but understanding that, that is that neighborhood that's, voicing the concern right now.
I appreciate your comments.
And I think there's a couple of other issues with that when we're taking down a tree. When that stump is left there, there's still the ability for those roots to grow that end up heaving up the sidewalk. You still have those roots that are growing into the sewers, a number of those issues that we do have with that. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to be clear that the neighborhood is asking that the stumps that are only in the easement, that the trees that belong to the city, that don't belong to the homeowner, be taken care of in this manner.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Any other comments at this time? So what we're giving you to take back to Colonial Village is the commitment from the Board of Water and Light to work with the city to come to some type of resolution, that we will be hearing from the administration in the next 10 days as to where things are moving, and we'll try to have some type of timeline so that this doesn't sit out there forever and a day.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, and this is the appointment of Joseph Graves to the Board of Water and Light, 3rd Ward position. Joe, if you would please come up to the table at this point. In your packet, you have the resolution along with the resume of Mr. Graves. Welcome. At this time, what we normally do is ask that the appointee give us some information about themselves, and then we open it up to the council for questions. I think that Mr. Peffley left the green light on for you. If it isn't on, please make sure that little green light is on, and we're all set to go.
Thank you so much. First, I'd like to thank you for entertaining me as a potential appointee to the Board of Water and Light.
Joe, can you make sure that green light is on down at the bottom? You've got to push it. Okay.
Push the button.
Okay.
Oh, there.
There you
I'm
go.
sorry.
Now
Yeah.
you're on. Thank you.
I'd like to thank council for considering my appointment and having me in this evening. Also would like to thank the mayor for submitting my name for consideration, and to whatever extent Samantha's had a role in that, I'd like to thank her as well. You know, I've spent my entire life, both publicly and professionally, working in the area of community service. I've tried to give of my time, my energy, in a variety of positions and a variety of organizations, all of which were to support this community. Why do I want to be on the Board of Water and Light? To continue that service. Not enough of us actually participate, get out there and try to represent the citizens as best they can. As was stated earlier by one of the speakers, this is not my first rodeo. It has been some years since I've been in touch with, close to, involved with the Board of Water and Light. Having said that, I also need to say I haven't buried my head in the sand all these years. I stay abreast of what's going on. I'm familiar with the whole issue of sustainability and our need to move quickly in that direction. In listening to Mr. Peffley, I like to say that I think that they're making progress. And some of the quote-unquote experts that would like the board to move quicker as it relates to certain technologies, battery storage being one, it's just not there yet. I think that the board has made a huge step in moving away from coal. They've made a huge step in investing in solar, investing in wind. I think they're on the right path. Now, we can debate and we can argue about if that pace is quick enough. And those are things that I if approved, I would be looking at as a board member. It was mentioned by my friend from IBEW that you know, I did challenge Mayor Bonero, not only as it related to selling the Board of Water and Light, but on a whole variety of issues. But having said that, let me also say that when I served on the board, I was very, at times, critical of decisions that were brought to the board. I'm sure if George Stojic was here, he would say I was really a pain because of the questions that I asked, the things that I challenged. I didn't just sit there and accept everything as gospel, and I won't do that in the future. I'll be challenging decisions as we go. Now, recognizing that I've been away from the board for a while, and they've accomplished a lot of things, they've moved in different directions, there's some things I need to catch up on. So I'm prepared to put in the work, I'm prepared to put in the time, I'm prepared to study, I'm prepared to do whatever I have to do to get myself up to speed. That will not be an issue. For those that are concerned about our environment, I'm more than concerned about the environment. I got grandkids, and I want them to have a healthy world to live in as well. There is no hesitation on my part to move us quickly as we can down this green path.
Okay,
I guess that's enough for now.
thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Graves? Councilmember Hussein, then Councilmember Jackson, Councilmember Dunbar.
Really just a quick couple comments. I am, as third ward representative on the city council, I am supportive of Mr. Joe Graves' appointment to the Board of Water and Light Board of Commissioners. When he discusses a life dedicated to public service, he has served, I think, admirably a few governors' administrations as chief of staff for Mayor Hollister. I think he served admirably in this role in the past. I think he has proven to be a student of all things related to LBWL. I still remember an editorial that was published by you in the City Pulse back in 2015, where I think you spoke very eloquently about the power of a public utility, where you spoke not just for the city of Lansing, but really the region. Talked a lot about the ice storm of 2013 and into 2014, the CRT, the recommendations, implementation, and you did challenge Bonero in that editorial, and I thought you did so in a very eloquent way. So I think your mind and your ability to process and question and challenge, I think, will be an asset to the board. And beyond that, over the last 3.5 years, Mr. Joe Graves and myself, we've met pretty regularly for lunch, kicked around ideas not just regarding public utilities, but really all things City of Lansing, and talked a lot about kind of the past and kind of the future and ways we get to where we need to be. So I really appreciate Joe Graves. I think he's going to do great as an as a Board of Water and Light Commissioner.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jackson and Councilmember Dunbar.
Thank you. So I operate under the belief that there is a current climate crisis, basically emergency, that we have a certain amount of time, 10 years or so, to basically do a lot of correction, or else we face the first wave of super serious problems. So I really do believe that, and I kind of wonder who else does and doesn't believe it, because I feel that if you do believe it, and I base my belief off of just the top scientists and basically research going on now, just trying to self-educate myself with the top reports and things. But if you do believe that, then what are your decisions moving forward? So you like to challenge, you challenged the former mayor. So I'm gonna challenge you a little bit. And I'm just concerned with the appointment for a few reasons. One is that you have a lot of experience, older experience at a time before this was really hitting. Two is that during our phone conversation, and I appreciate you for reaching out. And no reason to look upset, because ultimately, you know, I'm gonna have a lot of more positives to go. But during our phone conversation, we talked about, you know, I was like, where are you at, kind of, and I know you hadn't looked into it too much, but, you know, you're concerned with the ratepayer, and that is perfectly fine, because there are a unanimous group of board members who are for the ratepayer, and that's a good thing. And, you know, and not, I don't know where the balance is on that. You talked about, you know, your hypothetical grandma who, you know, has a certain fixed income, and you don't want to see her thing go up at all. And I talked about my real life kids and their kids. So that's just where our tension is in society, but the problem is we're not moving towards progress. So I was concerned, but the reason why I will support you is because when we did talk, you were completely open. You admitted that you aren't completely up to speed, but you were willing to get up to speed. I did do a few calls on you, and for one person, Tom Stanton gave a good recommendation as a person who will work hard for the city and try to educate themselves and challenge. So, you know, for those reasons, I would support your nomination, but I just challenge you, when you are sitting there, you know, just think about the citizens that spoke and just, you know, what's going on, because that's where all the decisions are made, and they're very important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've listened to the folks that were here tonight, but I've talked to other people with similar opinions. I will never just sit there and not push this particular agenda, the sustainability agenda. But some of the things that were said, even here in these chambers, and you mentioned the first phase will come. No, the first phase is here now. I mean, we've got storms now. We've got fires now. So we're already dealing with this climate change issue. We can't continue to daddle around. But the board has a very specific responsibility, and it is also a contributor to some of the climate problems that we have. It's minuscule globally, but some of these issues that we're talking about has to be addressed both at the state and the federal level. We currently have a president that doesn't believe we have climate change at all. And this battle that we're talking about, it's going to have to be fought on several fronts. And certainly the board needs to play its part and be a leader in this area, not only for the city of Lansing, but for the state. But I sometimes think that our criticism is a little misguided in that we're not holding Congress responsible. We're not holding the state responsible. It's a complex thing. I'm certainly willing to do everything I can as a Board and Water Light Commissioner to make sure that we are being leaders in this area and we're moving down that path as quickly as we can. And I hope that satisfies your question.
Thank you, Joe. Councilmember Dunbar.
Thank you. I appreciate the recognition that it has to be fought on many fronts. And I think that what we're dealing with here, what many of us are dealing with, is that we see no influence that we can hold over the President of the United States at this point.
It's coming.
Until the next election. But right now, we have some modicum of control over our immediate local appointees and some modicum of influence over the board. And I agree, our real children, he's got the little ones, I'm gonna have the grandchildren, we're all dealing with it. And we've kicked this can for so long. So given that you've been there before, and that you have some experience, I would like to ask you what you see moving forward, given that you've heard from those who have concerns about this, and there have been unanimous votes, and the ratepayer wins every time, and that's okay, understanding that we have some low-income folks in the city that need to be accounted for in this decision-making. But they won't have a future to pay lower rates if we have no environment to live in. So there has to be a balance. So given that you've been there before and given the concerns that you see now, how do you see balancing that going forward with sustainability having equal weight in your decision-making?
And Joe, before you answer that question, we are on a clock, so I just want to remind you.
Okay.
You and I go way back, so I know that you
Yeah,
can.
yeah. I'm sorry if I'm.
No, that's okay.
Now, Councilmember Dunbar, that's a real challenging question you just asked me there. How do, I mean, I think it's gonna have to be a lot of thought and a lot of consideration, excuse me, given to the facts that are put before us as a commission. It's real hard for me to get around this issue of what our ratepayers are paying. This hypothetical grandmother that was referenced by Councilmember Jackson, she's making choices right now. She's making choices about food, medicine, utility costs, etc. Someone on the board, and I don't know the current board members, but someone on the board does have to look out, and I don't think it's just low income people. I think it's middle class people that are concerned about those rates. So I'm gonna consider everything brought before me, but I'm always gonna ask, how do the ratepayers fit into this? And if we're going down a certain path, that a sustainable path, what does that do to the rates? And that's not to say I won't support going down that path, because I will. But it's going to be it's going to be a really tough decision each time.
Councilmember Dunbar.
Thank you. If I could follow up. Okay, so I'm going to play lawyer here, and I only play one on
Remember our
TV.
time,
I
Councilmember
know.
Dunbar.
If you are going to go down that sustainability road every time, which you just said, that's going to make you have to choose about rates. And I say that because we have low rates. We have very low rates.
I think we want to keep them there.
We have a gas tax being proposed right now because we can't fix our roads. People have to pay for what they want to live. And frankly, the environment is something we need to live. And I would like my tie rod not to fall off my car, so I will pay if the gas tax is approved. But my point is, if you think that there is a way, if you are open to finding a way that doesn't cost the ratepayers money, where there's innovation somewhere that can be found, I'm hopeful that you'll look in that direction. But everywhere else I've been, and I have been in a couple of different places in the last month in the state where the rates are way higher than this. And they're working on sustainability issues. And so I would hope that there is a way to consider, potentially raising a little bit, and potentially, some sustainability efforts as well. Because if we will always fall back on the ratepayer as a reason to not do sustainability initiatives. We will always fall back on that. And I don't want to see that continue anymore.
No, I think you misunderstood what I said. I didn't say that I would vote for the ratepayer each and every time. I'm committed to a sustainable future. And I'm willing to make those tough choices. I'm willing to give some, on the rates to get where we need to go. That's a commitment that I'll make to you. But I'm going to have to be in the chair. I'm going to have to look at the data. I'm going to have to talk to our people. President Wood's suggestion of having a community group involved in those discussions, I think that's a good idea. I'd like to be a part of those discussions. I think there's a lot to be offered by the folks that are concerned, and I think there's a lot that the public can learn by hearing what the challenges are on the other side of that equation. And, I need to be quiet here.
Are there other questions for Mr. Graves? I have a couple. I think I know the answers to these, but I still ask them. As a potential Board of Water and Light trustee, would you support selling the Board of Water and Light?
No.
Okay. You brought up my suggestion that I made to Mr. Peffley earlier. If you remember, you were Chief of Staff when we integrated that committee that had worked with GM.
I do.
At the time.
I do.
So you have an idea of what I'm talking about, of what I'm looking for.
Yes, ma'am.
If appointed, would that be something that you would take to the Board of Commissioners to start working with a group of citizens on that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, Vice President Spatafor.
There we go. I move the resolution appointing Joseph Graves as a Board of Water and Light Third Ward member with a term to expire June 30th, 2023.
I have a motion. Are there any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? This is on the agenda, Joe, for this evening. We will be handling it on the first part of the agenda. Meeting starts in 15 minutes. If you'd like to stay to be sworn in, you can do that, and we would be swearing you in shortly after public comment.
Yes, ma'am.
If you'd like to stay around.
Thank you
All right,
so much.
Thank you. Vice President Spatafor.
Madam President, I would move the resolution reappointing Ken Ross as an at-large member of the Lansing Board of Water and Light with a term to expire June 30th, 2023, appointing Wyatt Ludman as an at-large member of the Fire Board with a term to expire June 30th, 2023, and reappointing Sandra Thompson Kowalk as a third member of the Board of Police Commissioners, term to expire June 30th, 2023.
These are reappointments that have been vetted by the mayor and make the qualifications to be able to serve again. Councilmember Jackson.
So for the same concerning reasons, may we divide?
Yes, you may.
Resolution.
You're making a motion to divide the question. And so I'm assuming you'd like Ken Ross voted on first and the rest together.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, we have request to divide the question, so we have Ken Ross first. All those in favor of the reappointment? Yes. I'm sorry, Kathy.
That's okay. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
About this? When the, and I'm not sure if this is to you or to Samantha, but when the applications are coming forward for Board of Water and Light, and you said that there's more applications for that board than anything else.
I said it's a popular one. I don't know if there are more than other ones.
Okay,
but
it's a very, very popular one. So there are a lot of applications. Are you looking at the diversity of the skill sets of the people there?
We are.
Okay. So given that we have been very vocal about sustainability issues and things like that, have you seen applications that you will consider putting forward that have sustainability background?
I would love to. Don't usually review the applications. Usually it's Marilyn, the mayor, so I'll circle back with Marilyn and see what applications we've received. But I think if someone does have a sustainability background, that is very important.
Okay, I think that's where we're
Okay.
coming from, is that it's very important. It's, you know.
Kathy, if I could interrupt you for a second. Samantha, is the mayor going to be here for the council meeting this evening?
He's not.
Okay, then that can't help. Okay, I was going to suggest that
Yeah,
when
I
we
would've
voted
asked.
on it, that
I would
we
have asked.
asked.
Because, and I'll tell you why. I mean, when we put folks on, the plumbing board, we obviously want them to have a plumber's license, and when we want them to
Some
be.
of them they're required as part of being
Yeah,
on
they're
the
required to. But this is like a board that handles this massive utility, and there is no requirement that they have any kind of experience with the utility, with energy management, with sustainability practices. And it's and I'm not disparaging anybody who has been or will in the future be on the board for, it's just not something that we have in our charter that they have experience, but I think maybe it should be. I think maybe it should be. And given the fact that we've been so adamant that this be a topic moving forward, I would really hope, and again, and I'm going to say it out loud, but it's no disservice to Marilyn Plummer. She's looking at it and we're looking at it from a basic vetting perspective of, are they interested? Have they paid their taxes? Do
They
they
do send in
check the
resumes.
boxes?
We do get resumes and other information, so that's available as well.
I understand that, but I think that a lot of time, what we get is not necessarily based on the resumes. It's based on willingness to serve, and I don't discount that at all. I am appreciative to anybody who wants to serve, so let's just be clear with that. But I do think that on this board, we need to be looking a lot more closely at maybe moving in a direction of expertise in this area.
I have Councilmember Spitzley, then Councilmember Vice President Spatafor.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm just going to expand it a little bit more. I think appointments in general are, we do appreciate people who want to serve, but I think we've talked about this even in our ad hoc diversity committee. I mean, I think but the question is, for council, we have to basically, deal with the cards we're dealt with, and that the mayor's office is responsible for some of these appointments. But, I think that this is a conversation that needs to be had. I think that, again, the sustainability, as we look at the Board of Water and Light, having somebody from the city in the mayor's office as a liaison that works on sustainability issues and can report back, and I've said this a number of times, it is critical. And if we want to show that we think that we recognize the concerns that were expressed here by the people today, that's a small step to do that, is to appoint somebody in the office to work with the board to make sure that they're following whatever goals they have out and report back. That's a small step. We've got, the intern that's there that's supposed to be, we've given money to look at and do reports, but we could do it that way as well. And then that way, we've got somebody, that's an executive level person to work with the board. In a bigger scope, I think we've got to find a way to work with the administration for vetting. We need more people with, that have a broad experience from disabilities and, folks that are of color and to make sure that our candidate pool is diverse. I agree, if we're going to bring somebody on with the Board of Water and Light, and I don't know what the application process is, so I'm not going to certainly criticize what's going on in the mayor's office. They're really busy, but, going forward, I think the message needs to be conveyed that, to the extent that we can find the folks or even recruit folks that have this type of experience, we should do so. Thank you.
Vice President Spatafor.
In the interest of time, I will say I think some of the stuff that's brought to the podium tonight was very important and something we should be focusing on as a city and as a publicly owned utility. And I know it's something that when you hear from Mr. Peffley, when you hear from the Board of Commissioners, it is something that we're thinking about and trying to work toward. What I will say also, when you talk about experience, reappointment of someone who's been serving on a very complicated board, dealing with a hundreds of millions of dollar budget and an enterprise that involves construction and the lives of people when electricity is so important and water and clean water are important, having those types of experiences are also important. So a reappointment should not be discounted simply because there's an opportunity for other folks. When you've got someone here with a resume that has been serving on these boards, the qualifications to sit around this table are being 18 and living in the city and convincing enough folks in the city to vote for you. So, I mean, there's a little challenge there. But I do think that when you look at the Citizens Advisory Commission at the Board of Water and Light, this is exactly what we want, is someone who has an understanding of how the board works and knows what questions to ask and knows what buttons to push and levers to pull. So I'll be supporting the reappointment of Ken Ross, at the same time encouraging the mayor's office, when appointments open up, to look for folks that have a background that might help in the issues that we've been talking about, but not to forsake the experience in that name.
Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you. So the following is not personal at all. And I'm just operating under my belief and shared belief that, like, the time is now, we're in a crisis. So the unanimous decisions are fine, you know, they're vetted out, I'm sure. I'm not sure who comes and gives presentations on either side at the beginning, but, you know, people do their diligence and make their decisions. The natural gas plant is a decision that was made, and everybody's trying their best to make things happen. There was an understanding that coal was needed to get rid of it, that natural gas was kind of the new thing that was a little better, and decisions were made when they were. But during that time, there's been certain developments and certain people still coming to the table saying, wait, do this. And even as recently as this week, there's that article out here saying that natural gas is just as bad overall. So those things come to the table, and I know our citizenry of Lansing, it doesn't reflect the same decision. So there might be half the people care, half the people, you know, aren't aware, and the other half, if there's a third half, you know, undecided. But that doesn't reflect the way the board operates as far as decisions and the votes. So again, not being personal or anything, these appointments are up now, and they're for 4 years, and that's taking a huge chunk out of wherever it is. And Peter, you know, that, you know, experience alone is good, but like when people vote in Lansing, people with experience gets voted out all the time because it's just a reflection of the people, and we are a public utility, and we always talk about it all the time. So with that, I won't support the nomination because I just want to see somebody sitting at the table that is like going really hard for carbon reduction, efficiencies, because again, we can't just build renewable energy up and do whatever it takes without reducing our usage. But either way, we need someone at the table that's just for that. And then if it goes 7-1 or however many to 1 or however many to 2, it's just a reflection of what the people's will is. So that's why. And again, I'm going to criticize the vetting process a little bit, Samantha and the mayor. So I've been vocal about this, a few of us have, and you know it was important, and you've been to the Board Water and Light meetings where there's a bunch of good questions and asked, but then the appointments come up. I mean, I guess they haven't had a practice of being notified, but at least something, you know, going forward. And to also hear the will of a little bit of diversity on the board as far as viewpoints towards management, I don't think that was necessarily executed. But so I guess I'll put for the record, I would like to talk about the upcoming appointments. And I'm sorry, it's really nothing personal. I like everybody in the Board Water and Light, and it's not even an attack on our public utility. It's just the understanding and education that I'm learning every day about what's really happening.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor for Mr. Ross for reappointment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That was 2? Okay. Motion passes. Now for the other appointments to the Fire Board and to the Board of Police Commissioners. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. That takes us down to our next resolution, which is a proposed settlement. Mr. City Attorney?
Does the Council Vice President want to introduce? Okay. Pardon?
Go ahead and do your motion. Thank you.
Madam President, I move the approval of payment and proposed settlement as full and final settlement in the case of Deanna Ray and all other similarly situated, a certified Class V City of Lansing, Ingham County Circuit Court, case number 13-1242-NZ.
Okay, Mr. City Attorney.
Yes, Madam Chair. This is a resolution to approve a proposed settlement in a case that is 6 years old. It's a class that has been certified by the Ingham County Circuit Court regarding flooding allegations that occurred on the south side of Lansing in 2013. The class numbers approximately about 400, but it will be contingent upon the procedures set up by the court if this settlement is approved as to how claims are filed. As I give the overview of this, I'd like to invite Chief Deputy City Attorney Joe Abudin, who has been supervising this case since 2014 or 15.
Mr. Aboud, if you could come down to the table, please.
If you have specific questions. But the overview is that the case is proposed to be settled for $1,250,000, of which $300,000 of which will go into a special fund for a class of plaintiffs to help with the disconnection of footing drains. The other $950,000 would be decided by the court in terms of procedures on claimants, whatever the attorneys are to receive in all of those matters. But this is a settlement that has resulted, as I said, after about 6 years of litigation, and we've been up to the Michigan Supreme Court. There are companion cases, which I'm going to get into in a second, that have been filed. We recommend it. Not only does it seem to be a fair settlement, the original claims in this matter were in excess of this amount. We have filed we have pending litigation against the excess carrier, in this case, Star Indemnity for refusing coverage. That case is on hold, pending this case, which, if it isn't settled, will go to a jury trial for a trial for disposition on facts. And you should be aware also that last week we filed a federal lawsuit against our third-party administrator, Gallagher Bassett, claiming that there is a breach of contract. And I know I'm going to get this question. Yes, Gallagher Bassett is still our third-party administrator, but the contract is over on June 30th. We may be extending it for a couple months. We're waiting for an answer from the third-party administrator. We're claiming a breach of contract in that. And the reason that we waited now was because all of these discussions with the court and with the plaintiff class took a long time to get to this point. And we tendered some issues to the third-party administrator, and we have not gotten an answer yet. The other matter I want to mention is we had a closed session pursuant to the Open Meetings Act on this case. It's in the record, and the council members should be advised not to reference anything that happened during that closed session. Everything that you have before you is in the resolution, and everything else is on the public record. So we recommend this settlement, and if there are any questions, either I or Chief Deputy City Attorney Joe Abud can attempt to answer them for you.
Are there any, excuse me, are there any questions for the city attorney? Councilmember Jackson.
Just quickly, the insurance company is off all the way? I mean, is this all on Lansing budget? Settlement money?
The green light, you've got to push down. No, not on the mic. Yep.
It appears to be on.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Actually, Star Indemnity was the insurer at the time. They have denied this claim, and that's why we filed litigation against them. We believe the denial is inappropriate. So they have declined the claim. So as of right now, unless the courts change that denial, this is all going to come out of the city of Lansing's pocket. So for our purposes today, this is a request that the city attorney is recommending that we approve this settlement, knowing that although we have further litigation, it's best to plan that this is coming out of the city's pocket. Did that answer your question? Yep.
Are there other questions? My question would be, where is it coming from? Angie?
Yes, so in looking at the claims, the claims that were filed, the Public Service Department looked at sewer separation in the area of the claimants. And so based on that fact, in terms of the sanitary and the storm sewer systems and the separation, about $16,000 would come out of our general claims account that would be related to the storm water side of things. The sanitary sewer portion would be about $1,234,000, and that would come from the sewer fund.
Okay. So the almost 3 times what I'm paying in water that I'm paying for the sewer fund that goes in, that's supposed to be paying for bonds for sewer separation, you're now going to tell me that we're going to pay for it out of that? And I'm going to be seeing an increase of 3% on my bill on July?
The 3% was planned for the next fiscal year for
I
the
get that,
operations,
yeah.
correct, yep. This, because it was sanitary sewer related, that is the funding source for it.
And even though we have money that is left out of the Townsend ramp and things like that, we're not considering that at all?
Not at this time.
Councilmember Spitzley.
I was wanting to make sure I raised my hand high enough so
Uh-huh.
you wouldn't overlook me. Okay, so I need some clarification, and I apologize. And if you can't, I don't know, why is this not something that we're insured for? Like settlement insurance? And can you answer that in public, or is that a closed session thing? Because I wasn't there, and I apologize.
Well, I can indicate that the city did have a policy.
Are you on? 'Cause I can't.
I believe I am, but
No, that button I don't think is on.
No, he's just not close enough.
All right, put it closer. You know we go over.
Use
this
your
all the
outside
time.
voice, please.
He doesn't have one. Just put it closer, Joe.
okay.
There.
Got me?
Yep, we got.
Thank you. I can indicate that we did have, at the time, a policy of insurance. That insurance company, which is not unusual, has denied the claim. They have proffered a reason to deny the claim. We are now in active, well, the case was stayed pending the outcome of this, but it will become active if council ratifies this and the court or approves this resolution and the court approves the settlement for the class. And then in that active litigation, we will be pursuing some of our theories as to why their denial of our coverage was inappropriate.
So we have to pay the claim before we can go to court to seek reimbursement of the claim?
No, we went to court.
Okay.
That we filed the claims.
Okay.
We have preserved our spot in court. The court itself stayed this to determine what the outcome would be. Clearly, if we had got the case dismissed and won the case, there would be no issue for the federal court to determine.
What happens if, this is my, this one, what happens if it's not approved tonight? The settlement's not approved?
Well, then we continue with the litigation in the circuit court case and go to trial.
Okay. Madam President, this is, I gotta tell you, I'm not quite sure I'm gonna, I don't think I'm gonna approve this. I'm just kind of, to me, it seems, and it's not a, I'm not just trying to disparage anybody, but it seems whenever we have an additional cost in the city, the first place we do is we look to our residents to do this. And you're right, we got a 3% rate increase. That money is not supposed to be used to pay for settlement costs. I mean, to me, we have got, I cannot support this. Every time we, like I said, every time we turn around, the first thing we do is, when we have an extra cost, we have to do something, it goes on the back of our citizens, and I can't support that.
I've got Councilmember Jackson and Councilmember Dunbar, and then I have a question.
This whole case is pretty sad in the fact that first, a lot of people's basements got backed up with sewage. It's a shame just because, you know, you want to keep your home clean, but through the different infrastructure, you know, things happened. It's also sad that the city, as a public entity, we have to defend, you know, from all these millions of dollars and say it's not our fault for whatever reasons. But it's most alarming that it's because, okay, 100-year storm came, meaning out of every 100 years it's supposed to happen once. It wiped us out, it backed up everybody's sewers, there was so much rain that, you know, no sewer system is even supposed to be made for that much downfall in that amount of time. In fact, the requirements only say that you have to have a 50-year or a 15-year, whatever it is.
10-year.
But let's just tie it all back. With the way things are going, we're gonna have more 100-year storms through our climate change. We're gonna have, those are gonna come reoccurring so much. And this is just one little city with one little, however many millions of dollars it is, but there's coming more, and that's just one other thing I wanted to point out. And I'm done.
Thank you. Councilmember Dunbar.
Thank you. I agree. It is not ideal to bring this back to the citizens. I wish we had addressed it years ago when it originally happened, because I'm not even sure if I can say this without compromising the case.
Well, then don't.
Yeah, so then let's be advised not to, but I am very disappointed that it got to this point, because I think we should have handled it very differently many years ago. And if I'm remembering it correctly, is this because of the notification process? There was some 30-day requirement with the other administrator. Is that what I'm remembering this hinges on? And I'm sorry, the public doesn't probably understand what I'm talking about right now, but.
There were certain notice requirements, and quite frankly, the insurance companies are using whatever they can to deny the claim, and so that's always part of their analysis.
Mr. City Attorney.
I might also point out, lest it escape, we have filed legal actions as necessary against the insurance company again and against the third-party administrator. We were hoping to have a good solution from the third-party administrator, and it didn't happen, and we waited until we were in jeopardy of running through the statute of limitations, and it was filed. The other item I want to point out is a part of this settlement is actually a fund that will be, this money is generally for the class, these are for residents. Because of damages, they have to prove their claim. And then part of it, the $300,000 is going to be set aside as a fund so that affected claimants can fix their footing drains. We'll have plumbers that will be able to do that, and To the extent that there is leftover money, I believe the money goes back into the sewer fund to remedy other issues.
If I may follow up, the funding, regardless of where it comes from, is going to be used by more people than just involved in this class, but anybody who's been affected by this type of damage in the city can make a claim against those funds.
It's just the members of the class. There are two separate classes, those that originally filed a claim. It's either called A or B, that's the first class. And then there's a second class of those who the court, through its procedures, will allow to make a second claim, and there's going to be a difference as to what each class gets. But so there will be class recipients, homeowners. And then there will be the opportunity to also file a request to have a city-approved plumber fix the footing drain issues that were involved in this case.
And just so I can clarify this one more time, we are going to put $300,000 out of the sewer fund that they are already paying into a fund that will allow them to end up getting relief from that they have paid into. I just want to make sure that we all understand this. Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. So it's $1 million plus is the settlement. $300,000 supposedly goes back into this fund.
Correct.
Where's the, can someone tell me where the other dollars are going to?
Yes.
The attorneys.
Oh, hello.
Go ahead, Mr. Booth.
Okay, the total amount of the settlement is, has $950,000 going to the class.
Pull it
Directly
closer to
to
you
the-
again, Joan.
I'm sorry, directly to the class.
They're paying their own.
Then the $300,000 goes into the sewer fund. Now, an interesting note here is that the courts have said that the city is not responsible for the footing drains. Those are the property owner's responsibilities. And we do have the B2P2, the backflow prevention program, was already in place for people that wanted to get off the footing drains. Footing drains are actually illegal. So this is a problem. We have these footing drains in the city. This is an opportunity. We fashioned this settlement so that to give our citizens the opportunity to get off these illegal footing drains and connect with our sewer in a meaningful way so that they won't have this backup problem. So that's one of the benefits of this settlement.
So, but the settlement in this $300,000 is only for the people in the class, or is it a citywide settlement?
This settlement only applies to the class, to the class of people involved. However, the program, the existing backup prevention flow program, exists for all members of the city. However, they will not have the cost defrayed as this class has the opportunity to do.
So my question would be to the city attorney, what is our timeline on this?
We have a jury trial. When is it set for trial, Joe? This was in court-ordered facilitation
I get that.
from Judge Jamo. And what's our timeline on this?
We do not have a trial date set, but we have a court and a class waiting on the city to see if they will ratify this settlement. So they are waiting for this. If the city is not going to ratify or approve this settlement, then the court will bring us in to schedule further litigation strategy and dates.
So what you'd be looking at is a trial date down the road. I don't know if, has all discovery been done yet?
No, we still have to conduct discovery on the damages.
So you've got discovery, you've got motions that'll come up. You're probably looking at a year out for a jury trial at the least.
My question would be to the administration and to the finance director. I still do not understand when we have other pots of money. I understand that this is a sewer-related issue. Why we are not looking at that when we also because I'm sure what the city attorney or Mr. Aboud will say to us is the fact that there is a potential that we'll get this money back from the two suits that we're involved with. But in the meantime, I think what we're demonstrating out here is not the appropriate way to handle this particular case. Is there any thought on the administration of looking at a different pot of money other than the sewer fund?
No, there's not. This is related again to the sanitary sewer system, which is funded by rates. If the general fund were to pay for it, it would be taxpayer dollars. It would be, so really because the city is funded majority by our citizens, be it through rates, be it through property taxes and income taxes, when there are settlements, and there are communities who have had very large settlements rendered against them, and they've had to increase their taxes or they've had to increase the rates and things. But I do want to emphasize that the 3% rate increase that is proposed for the 2020 budget is for those operations. In looking at the longer-term rate modeling, this can be absorbed by the rate, by the sewer fund in those projections, and so that 3% increase is not related to this settlement. It is for the operations for the 2020 budget and the ongoing CSO separation needed.
I absolutely understand that, but that still does not get with my issue. Councilmember Spitzley and Councilmember Dunbar.
I get that the 3% rate increase is not a result of this, but it is a result of this, because if we're paying this money, we're taking it out of the fund, and the 3% really is going to be used to replenish the money that we're paying for the settlement. And so that, to me, that's frustrating in itself. The other thing is, you're having the entire city of Lansing basically pay for, a few people to have this issue done. That's an issue. And I don't know, and maybe but what if another, group of folks who are having sewer issues right now and water issues decide, they want to sue the city of Lansing? I just think it troubles me. So, thank you.
Councilmember Dunbar.
Thank you. The 3% generates more than the settlement amount, correct? I mean, are you explaining to us that 3% was going to happen no matter what? It was going to generate a certain amount of money, and from that amount of money, we always have a reserve in there because it's an enterprise fund, so you're going to pull that amount of money from there.
Correct. The 3% is part of a longer-term funding strategy for the CSO project, which is, of course, a long-term project. So rather than ramping up rates by 6, 8, 10% in one given year, we look at a longer-term strategy. So in terms of that longer-term strategy, yes, does this dip down a little bit, but we still have a cushion, so to speak, and then through the longer-term rate structure, that will be able to be replenished.
Okay, so, I'm going to quote my grandmother, the 6, 1 1/2 dozen and another. If we pull it from there, it's going to affect every person that has water in the city. And if we did it from the general fund, it's going to affect everybody that pays taxes in the city. It's still going to affect our citizens in some way. I mean, maybe you're spreading it over the pool of more taxpayers if we pull it out of the general fund, but I guess in my mind, it makes sense since it's an enterprise fund and this is an enterprise-related situation. My fear would be that if we go to court, we're going to have the additional year of legal fees, which we are racking up right now, and this is exactly how it works in lawsuits, is the cost of actually defending the lawsuit can end up costing more than the actual amount. And if we've racked up all this over the next year, we could end up with a jury that awards far more than this, and then we bond, because that's what cities do when they don't have enough money in their general fund or in their other funds. They're required by law to bond to cover the costs of a settlement. And so then we're going to end up with a larger amount. So I guess I would ask everybody to consider that. I mean, it might be the easiest thing at this point to consider, unless you guys want to have a little, discussion about the likelihood of succeeding even in a year from now. But success is relative to the amount of money that we're paying for attorneys. So I'm just throwing that out there. This
I-
might be the cheapest option that we have.
I understand what you're saying, Councilmember Dunbar, but the money that I'm talking about is not the general fund. I am talking about the money that came from the sale of Townsend Ramp. We have $2.5 million that's still out there for that. So it isn't money that would be coming out of the general fund. Vice President Spatafor.
I think a lot has been said. I agree with Councilmember Dunbar, although many folks have raised good points about the funding source. I do think this is a cut our losses type situation. This has been going on for years. And I just, the resolution doesn't necessarily speak to the payment source, as far as I can tell. I would approve the resolution, maybe encourage the administration to look at something different from a funding source, but at the end of the day, this is a sewer problem, and I think that's the funding source that we have to pay for the settlement, absent a much larger jury verdict or jury award. I'd be supporting the resolution as is.
Okay, is there any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution say aye. Aye. That's 1, 2, 3. That's 3, 4. No, you can't in closed session. Or closed session in committee of a whole. In committee of a whole, you can't do, well, we're in committee of a whole. Okay, we have 4. All those opposed say aye. Aye. Councilmember Dunbar, where were you? I said aye. Aye, okay, so you have 5 to 2. Okay. Well, I looked right at you and didn't see you say anything, so I'm sorry. All right, so it passes and is on for the agenda. That takes us, and I apologize to those that are watching, those who are in the audience. We do have one more item on the agenda that we will deal with. The rest of those items we will be bringing up in the council meeting, and so we'll deal with those. The next item is the budget amendment. Angie.
You have before you a year-end budget amendment for the fiscal year June 30th, 2019. That will be ending actually in about a week. I alluded to this a couple weeks ago when I came and spoke about the vacancy factor. I did allude to some budget adjustments that would be needed. So if you look at the budget amendment, it starts with an increase in general fund revenues for special election revenues from the school district election. I'm going to jump down a little bit, or I'm going to come back to that, I should say. I'll revisit that revenue amount in a minute. But the next section that you're going to see under general fund expenditures is the vacancy factor that we talked about a couple weeks ago. When the budget is put together for the new fiscal year, so to speak, there is a negative amount budgeted. And so for the fiscal year 19 budget, it was a negative $500,000 for vacancy factor. That's because we know that there's going to be vacancies during the year. We just don't know which departments they're going to occur in. So then at the end of the year here, we then do an amendment to increase the vacancy factor to $500,000. Remember, that was a negative $500,000. That basically zeroes it out by adding $500,000 to it. And then that funding source for that is coming from various departments that had vacancies in them. In this case, Finance Department, City Attorney's Office, and Economic Development and Planning. And you'll see the subtotal for that zeroes itself out. Then the next section is some additional needs that were needed throughout the fiscal year. As we're coming to the end of the year, we have a better feel for that. One is, very first one is $250,000 for police officer front loading that occurred during the year. That was to be able to keep up on candidates and good qualified candidates to be able to keep in pace with that in terms of vacancies that we knew were coming up. The city clerk's office, now I'm going to jump back to that revenue source. They had additional, more than expected election expenses, and some of that, $75,000 of that, is offset by the additional revenue and reimbursement we will receive. In addition to that, earlier in the year, very early in the fiscal year, you approved the Lansing Ignite contract, and that had in it, and that was approved after the beginning of this fiscal year, so that had in it some, the turf turnover replacement that has to happen for those games, and so that, for the field conversions, so that there's $25,000 for that. Again, this is not an additional request by the Ignite, this is just from the original contract that was signed. And so those additional needs are then offset by, so there's 460,000 total additional needs. 385,000 of that is offset by some of the other vacancies that we had. So then you see a net amount of 75,000, which is then offset by that additional revenue for the special election. And then, below that, you see the stadium fund, because when we talk about the field conversions for the Ignite team, that has its own fund, the stadium fund, so that amount in the general fund transfers over to the stadium fund to fund those additional needs.
Okay, do we have any questions on this? Do I see any questions? Vice President Spatafor?
Move the resolution for the fiscal year 2019 budget amendment.
We have a motion. My only question, and you're not ready to appropriate the rest of the vacancy factor at this time?
Correct. That will go to offset other revenue adjustments and things in the general fund.
And when do you expect that that will be ready?
Oh, there is no need for an additional budget amendment. The additional vacancy factor. I'm sorry.
I know it's not an additional budget amendment, but there will be money that will be going into the rainy day fund and all of those. When do you think that will be done?
When will we have final numbers? Is that what you're asking for?
Yes,
that will be in the fall, as we, the fiscal year ends June 30th. Typically, we still have bills related to this fiscal year that we receive in like August, September timeframe, and we have some revenues that we have to accrue and things like that. So it's generally about mid-October to November where we start getting, really being able to finalize those numbers.
The reason I ask is because if I didn't misunderstand, we had just received our carry forwards earlier in June from last year.
The carry forwards from fiscal year 18, I believe that was like January or so that those were brought forward. Yeah.
Mr. Brewer?
I think she's reflecting on when it was actually entered in IFAS. And we're specifically talking about the council carry forwards that was requested for the promotional and the community funding that was a per the prior request.
Okay. No, yeah, that was definitely approved early this calendar year, I would say. I think it was right after the December timeframe and January up.
Okay. All right, thank you. So we have a motion on this. Do we have any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The other three items that we have on the agenda are ordinances that we'll be setting public hearings on. Since we had hoped to talk about those a little before that, but because of the timeline, we will do this during the council meeting when they come up on the agenda. So with that, we will move to adjourn, and we will take 2 minutes to get things transferred over and the clerk in, and then we will start our council meeting. We do have 2 people that are being sworn in this evening, and we will move those to the head of the agenda. So if you are here to be sworn in, we will have you then. Thank you. We are adjourned.
If not, let me know.
I'm gonna bring a new one in. Yep, I sent it to the printer earlier, so I just gotta hope it